Welcome to Spaces, built by Bush Construction, a podcast that brings genuine conversations that opens minds to creative ideas in construction, design, and development. We'll share in-depth stories as an experienced commercial contractor and design firm, as well as our candid interviews with business leaders as it relates to the construction industry. So let's get started. In a previous podcast, AJ Loss, Bush Construction's president and CEO, gave us a beneficial overview of the 4 different paths business owners can choose when selecting the team to design and build their new building. We call these delivery methods. They include 1. Design, bid, build, or hard bid. 2. Construction manager as agent, or CMA. 3. Construction manager as constructor, or CMC, or at times referred to as construction manager at risk. And 4, design build. We also threw in a bonus 5th, the role of a developer, the path where the contractor owns, builds, and leases a space back to the business owner. After recording the delivery methods overview episode, we realized the benefit of doing a deeper dive into each one of these paths. So today, we're doing a deep dive into the hard bid, or design, bid, build delivery method. We will cover the pros and cons, as well as which projects and business owners are best suited to this method. Our Spaces podcast team also had a few questions that we've always wondered ourselves regarding the hard bid delivery method. Join Michael, Ali, and I to hear AJ answer those questions, add a bit of history, and learn whether the hard bid delivery method is a good fit for you and your next project. In the past, we did an episode on delivery methods, and it was a general overview trying to nail pros and cons of all of them, and we brought up 5 or 6 of them. So now it would be a great idea for us to do a deep dive into each one a little bit more, bringing up some real world examples. So let's take the hard bid one today. And AJ, can you refresh us on what the pros and cons of hard bid delivery method would be?
Sure. Okay, let's go over nomenclature first. We call it hard bid, we call it competitive bid, we call it public bid. There's lots of different names to use, but we'll refer to it as hard bid during this episode. And really, pros and cons. The pros of the hard bid delivery method is that it's very simple to understand. The plans are designed, the plans are sent to contractors to bid, and then the contractors bid and provide a price, and they build it. So you design, you bid, you build. Okay? So it's very simple to understand. It's been tested many, many times across the country, and for decades, this method has been used. So it's very well tested, and there is a perception among many that this delivers the best price. And while that's true, this delivers the best price for the design that's been designed, there is a lot of debate about whether or not the best design actually got priced. So would the involvement of a contractor have made that design better? Or would the price have been more accurate on bid day? So while, yes, it is very true, this delivers the best price for the design, whether or not that was the best design in the hard bid delivery method is a debate by many. So those are the pros. The cons, as I just mentioned, without the involvement of a contractor, the input of a contractor, during the design process, the pre-construction process, some things just may not get looked at with through the lens of a contractor. It could be schedule related. Maybe the project takes longer than everyone else in the room have anticipated. We've talked before about the bid day surprise. So what if the architect's budget number for the project is off? If it's off by 10 or 20%, that's bad even on the upside or the downside. If it's off on the upside, the owner's got to figure out how to raise more funds to build this project. Or if it's off on the downside, what are the things we cut out of this project that we really wish we would have had, but now we've got to redesign it to put them back in the project because we're under budget by so much. Finally, one of the final cons is that it is just a more contentious delivery method. It pits the owner and the architect against the contractor who was awarded the project solely based on being the low price, not based on typically on qualifications or their ability to deliver a project in a less contentious manner. It is just based on low price. So it is a more contentious delivery method as the final con.
Very good. And so I guess I would love to hear maybe that real world example of when this would be a pro. Like, this is a great option for this project. What would that look like? Has Bush done some that you're like, that was a really good selection for hard bid?
Well, let's go over the like when to use, then we'll get into some real world examples. So when to use this, as you asked, it's really for non-complex projects, when it's a simple project. And we're talking about here, it's a greenfield site, which to us in the business means you're building a brand new building in an open field versus a renovation. Renovations are tough. They're tough to understand what's behind the walls that haven't been uncovered yet, or there's a lot of unforeseen conditions. So in a greenfield site where there's really simple construction, maybe it's building a hospital, would that be the right project to do a competitive bid, a hard bid? Probably not, because there's so many complexities in that. But a school project, for instance, that might be a good example of when to use hard bid. Again, one final thing to consider when to use this project delivery method is when you've got an advanced owner who understands this delivery method. So if there's an owner who's done this before, built buildings many times, not only who has done it, but who has done it successfully in the competitive bid delivery method, this one is a good option for them because they know what they're getting into. They know how to administer it. They know how to make sure it's less contentious than more contentious because of just their past involvement and their past understanding of the way the delivery method works. Really having an owner who's understood this and delivered this successfully before in the past would be another time when to use this. Okay, so you also asked, hey, give me some real world examples of when this has worked well and when it hasn't. So 2 examples. We built a school project a number of years ago, and this is an example of when it really worked well. So it was a brand new school. It was with a client, the school district, who has managed this many, many times before in the past. And this is kind of the example. It's a school project, not too difficult. It was not a terribly contentious relationship because the owner understood the delivery method. The architect understood the delivery method. While it was a low-priced award, the project ended up going very, very well because of all the alignment of, it was non-complex, it was a greenfield site, and the owner knew what to expect and had done this before successfully. So, a project example of ours from the past that maybe didn't go as well because they chose the hard bid delivery method was a multifamily project we built a number of years ago. And on this project, there was a specific site issue that really haunted the project from the very beginning. And had we been involved as a construction manager, as an agent, or a construction manager as constructor, we would have found and been able to highlight in the plans and had an open dialogue with the architect and the owner to say, there is a significant element of this project that is missing. While we did that during the hard bid phase of the project, there wasn't enough time duration or enough open dialogue with the architect and the owner to say, this is going to be a really, really big issue. So we raised it. They said, hey, we don't think it's going to be a big issue. Sure enough, 4 months later, the issue that we had a very small amount of time to discuss with the owner, and they had very little desire to listen to our feedback, it really haunted the project. And it turned out in a long schedule extension, which the owner approved, but it was far beyond when the owner wanted to be in the building and cost impacts to incorporate this element into the project. That should have been done from the very, very beginning, but it was more costly to do once construction had started. So there's sort of a real world example of when it has worked well and when it didn't necessarily work so well.
Dale, and you had mentioned, so the one that went really well, that was something that was more of a simple method. An owner knows, the architect and contractor maybe already have a great relationship. And so the key really is that communication. Going back to, if you feel that you have great communication as a team up front, this could be a very good delivery method for your project. And on the multifamily one, were there relationships in place already? Was that communication you had mentioned maybe just a small period of time that you were able to communicate back to the architect and owner? Was communication maybe that big missing link?
Yeah, you're exactly right. The communication able to be conducted during the hard bid phase of the project. Here are the plans. Go bid them. Low price wins. It's such a small window. And while all parties may have been interested to have the same end result, a successful project, the window for dialogue was so short. And once we were selected based on low price, the table had been set. There was really no chance to go back and say, hey, remember this thing we mentioned? The owner had already told us, just wait. We'll see how things turn out. We're not concerned. We took their guidance, and later on, it turned out it sort of haunted them. So you can have parties that are all aligned around having great communication, but the window to do it in a hard bid scenario is not sufficient. And had we had months to discuss that concern with them, I think we would have all come to an agreement that this additional site mitigation issue that we wish would have been incorporated from the beginning would have been done.
Is that typical in a hard bid to where that communication between the time when the plans are designed and done and it goes out to contractors to bid, is it typical that there's not a lot of communication window?
Yeah, it's typically a short 2 or 3 week window. And I'll be honest, the contractors that we don't do a lot of hard bid work. We do some, but the contractors that do hard bid work often, some of them have no incentive whatsoever to bring these issues up. They say, you know what, that's the owner, the architect, they wanted to go hard bid delivery method. They don't have the site mitigation issue included in the plans. It's going to come up later on. They have no incentive to bring that up during the competitive bidding phase. We wanted to make sure it was a great project, so we did bring it up. It fell on sort of deaf ears. But yeah, the time frame is short. And to be honest, contractors who are bidding hard bid projects day in, day out as their sole line of business, they really don't have a whole lot of incentive to bring this up.
And when you talk about the time frame for collaboration between design, bid, build, hard bid, and kind of the other delivery methods, if you think about it, you have your design team, your architects and engineers for, call it 6 months to design a large project. At the end of that 6 months, there's 2 or 3 weeks to get, like you said, contractor input, right? Well, there's value in both of those. So when you start to talk about the other delivery methods, that 6 months runs in parallel, where instead it's 6 months of one line, stop that line, go 2 to 3 weeks of a contractor asking as many questions as possible to things that they're finding within the bid documents, and then you go right to build. So there's a very, like I said, very short, rapid fire time frame to kind of figure things out.
So then on this communication thread, if this contractor has 2 or 3 weeks, they've actually focused all their attention on bidding the project and not touching on all of those issues or talking about them with the owner and the architect. What are repercussions? Like, what happens when that contractor is now the winning low bid? How does that affect that guaranteed low price or that hard stop schedule?
Yeah, great point. That's where the change orders come in. When the design isn't 100% accurate, complete, developed, which occurs on every single project. There has never been a perfect design anywhere. It's just the nature of design. It is unique. You design every building once. That'll never happen again the exact same way, at the same time, with the same trade contractor, with the same general contractor, same design, same site conditions, same rain conditions. Every building gets built only once. And because of that, there is a natural tendency to develop change orders. So after the design is complete, the contractor says, now we want to dig in really deep and really get into the design to make sure this thing is buildable. And that's when all the discovery of design gaps or ambiguities or some sort of complication in the design comes up. And the contractor sends these questions into the architect and the owner to have them answered, and they end up in change orders. But again, it's only upon award of the contract that the contractor has really good incentive to say, now we need to really figure out this project. Put it together forward and backward, understand how it's absolutely going to be built, whereas their priority during the bid phase was really just, what's the price? What's my price for this building? And that was their priority.
During the bid stage, do contractors allow variance for change orders in price, or does that come after?
Contractors, if they include funds to accommodate change orders, will likely not win the project. So again, it is a low-priced competition. If we put 5 or 10 or 20,000 or 100,000, whatever it is, for every single ambiguity we see, it's going to mean that we're not a low bid contractor. So what contractors do, is they price what the drawings show. Nothing more, nothing less. And while it may be ambiguous, we make an assumption of what the architect meant. Maybe there's an open dialogue for really vetting out what that issue is, or maybe there's not. But at the bid day, contractors who put in contingencies, we call them, for every single ambiguity typically don't win the project. So it's their job to interpret the drawings no more or no less than what the drawings actually say.
So what is the root cause of a change order?
Yeah, it's typically a design ambiguity, omission, or it could be just the fact that something isn't constructible, like everybody had anticipated during the design phase. Now I mentioned schools are a good candidate for competitive bid, hard bid projects because they understand there will be change orders. And they act quickly. They take them to the board. They say, here's the change order for this. Was it on the drawings? No, it wasn't. Give the contractor the change order, and we move on. Owners who don't understand the hard bid delivery method say, oh, change order. I'm going to fight this. Well, that doesn't work out well for the project, for the owner, for the contractor. I'll tell you, as a contractor, we hate change orders. Change orders are complex to administer. They're contentious. We lose money on change orders because they are so time-consuming, specifically on a project where an owner hasn't established a real good familiarity with this delivery method, and they want to fight so hard. We lose money on all those change orders. We'd rather have a project that is designed perfectly, and there are no change orders. We get in there, we build it, we move on, and that would be ideal. But it really doesn't happen. But that's why schools are great candidates for this, because they understand there will be change orders. They accept it. They write the change order for when it's legitimate, and then they move on.
And from the design team side of hard bid, the design team will typically advise the owner to hold an owner contingency for those change orders and things up front. So if the project's $10 million, they're holding $10.1 million with anticipation of $100,000 in change orders after the fact.
Right, and this might be getting in the weeds a little bit, but as far as the general contractor, it's not necessarily the general contractor that's presented the change order. We're also advocates for trade partners, which is a deeper level of a relationship, correct?
Yeah, that's a great point. The GC, general contractor, rarely generates the change order. It is typically there's a scope gap or a design gap in the plumbing system, and something's missing. So the plumbing contractor brings it to the general contractor then turns it into the owner. So most change orders on hard bid projects are generated first at the trade contractor level. It's just the contractor's responsibility to look at the drawings and say, is this a design issue or is this a trade contractor issue where they should have interpreted the drawings a little bit different? The GC is sort of the shield for the owner in that case. Is this really legitimate? We've got the first stab at determining legitimacy. If it is legitimate, we process it and pass it along. If it's not, we say to the trade contractor, no, this isn't legitimate, and here's why.
In the industry, why is hard bid so well known? It seems, lots of familiarity with its delivery method. So I guess, can you, from your perspective, why do you think it's the most traditional or popular?
It's probably because it is most easy to understand. So again, you design it, you bid it, you build it. That's really easy to understand. Now, what's not easy to do is to actually go through the process of managing a hard bid contract. So it's really not simple to administer. It's easy to understand the delivery method. So I think it's for that reason that hard bid has become so popular. And I think back, was this the first delivery method? Back in Egypt, did Pharaoh use a hard bid delivery method? I find that really hard to believe because they didn't hire an architect to do this. They said, hey, we'd like to build this shape. It looks about like this. And hey, where can we get our resources? It was built on the fly. That's probably the best definition of design build you can find. You know what? We're all in the room together. Let's design it as we go, build it as we go. So I can't say that was necessarily the one that's been around the longest, but I think it's most well known because it's just simple to understand. And for that reason, it's considered to be the most traditional.
Now, we kind of discussed low price, and I'm thinking price versus value on hard bid or initial investment versus long-term investment. So I think the general understanding in the industry is that hard bid is the lowest initial price, and that's probably true. But with that low initial price, are you getting the lowest long-term value or lowest long-term investment, where the reason the price is lower is because you've cut out some of that cost to get the input of the contractor or in any other delivery method, be the CM or whatever. You've passed that cost down the line, but does that also grow a little bit by the kind of competitive nature and things like that?
Yeah, Michael, you're right. And if we're going to stress one word in that, it is initial. The lowest initial price. So the price on bid day, That's the lowest initial price. However, the price at the end of the day will not be that. And the price we're talking about here could be the actual cost in dollars and cents. The price could be the schedule, where the owner anticipated moving in on a certain date and actually delayed 3 or 4 months because of something that didn't get brought up due to lack of contractor input in the design phase. So that could be the lowest initial price, or it could be really just the input of a contractor, understanding the owner's needs, having a different voice, a different lens at looking at the design process. Maybe the long-term suitability of that building will have been better because the contractor's voice was in there. There's an option for impact-resistant drywall or CMU, concrete masonry units. Both of them are options for walls that will receive high impact, but in a school, what makes more sense? Either one could be the answer, but the contractor's input during the design process to say, here's the cost of impact-resistant drywall, and here's the cost of CMU. Owner, you make the decision. And having that contractor's input involved in the design process really may end up resulting in a better value for that owner at the end of the day.
And it seems like that kind of runs in parallel with the advanced owner and owner effort on the design bid build side versus the other delivery methods where, yeah, it's a little less expensive because you have not incurred that cost for the contractor input. And if you're a great owner and a great architect, you're more than likely going to figure out all of these things without contractor input. But if not so much, it may be very valuable to have that contractor input running, again, parallel versus kind of the we stop, you begin approach.
You raise a great point. There are many architects who have delivered really solid feedback to owners and who can think like contractors, can put themselves in the contractor's shoes to say, here's how to make it constructible, here's all the cost studies. There are plenty of architects that can do that, but it is not all of them. And so in the event an owner chooses an architect who doesn't have those sort of capabilities, that's when it really makes sense to have a contractor involved.
Yep, and to your impact-resistant comment, there's also school owners who are going to say, I'm okay with impact-resistant drywall, and there's another one who's going to say, I had a kid kick a hole in my wall, so it's never going to happen, and I'm going to have block no matter what. I don't care what the cost is, and things like that. So you just have owners who have kind of different levels of, I've been there, and I'm gonna pick exactly what I want.
Very good. I think that was so helpful, doing a deeper dive into just this one specific traditional, maybe not oldest, but easiest to understand delivery method. And we would love to answer any other questions that you might have. You can visit our website at www.bushconstruct.com. That's BUSHCONSTRUCT.com. The blog will be available. This podcast would be available, and reach out through the contact form and ask any other questions you might have on the hard bid delivery method.